Hi, it's Todd at Todd's Workshop and Todd Cutler here, and today I'm at Bushfire Forge with Owen Bush, amazing school of bladesmithing. But more importantly, I'm here with this amazing sword. This has got a blade which is pattern welded by Owen, and we're going to show you what pattern welding is all about and what Owen's really well known for. He has created a sword, the blade of a sword, with the hilt work and the scabbard work by another craftsman who's not here, called Petr Florianek. And between the two of them, they have made this amazing sword. I haven't seen it, all right? I've just heard a bit about it and I've read a bit about it. Owen has, you haven't seen it either?
I haven't seen the finished sword, no, I'm looking forward to it.
So Owen's seen the blade, but not the whole thing. So this is going to be a reveal for both of us. But basically, this sword has come into existence because of this book. So A Song of Steel by J.C. Duncan. And we'll come back a little bit to it because it really plays into what this sword is all about. It is a Viking sword, but with a slight twist on it. So, Owen, what is in here?
So the interesting thing about this sword is that it was a combination idea of taking that Norse idea of what a sword is, the pattern welded blade showing the virtuosity of the smith and the virtuosity of the warrior, and combining it with elements of a later medieval kind of vision of a sword. Well, the original objects were definitely acts of quite incredible creation, pattern welding in particular. I mean, it's a well. This one's got some special pattern welding from my point of view in it.
I think if that's not an in to actually unwrapping this sword, Owen, what is?
So I've seen the blade on this obviously because I made it.
Yeah.
I guess I finished it a year and a half ago, and then it went off to Petr, and it's really, really nice to actually see what someone else can bring to it. And the other thing about having someone else work on it is it's easy to say it's lovely, which you can't really say about your own work.
Right, well, do you want to look at it first or shall I? No,
I'd like to, if that's all right.
Yeah. Yes, he inlaid it, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. I like it a lot. It is a beautiful thing. It's much, much nicer than the pictures.
He's a pointy little fellow, isn't he?
Yeah, well, the idea was that it was a Norse blade, but it's also a crossover in that it's an early medieval style sword. I like the feel of it a lot.
Yeah, we'll hand it over.
Yeah, okay. I do. I like it a lot. That's nice.
God, that is a thing. Very sharp point for a Viking sword. Really interesting blade. I mean, there's so much complexity in what's going on in the pattern welding on the blade. Bronze inlaid runes, more runes on the very nicely carved bronze hilt work. Intertwining beasts on one side, lovely, really typically Viking. A bit of rune work on the other, and then a warrior waiting in the doorway. I'm guessing he's waiting in Valhalla for the owner of that sword. That is lovely. I think the funny thing is, I see so much of Owen's work because we're good friends, and I forget that actually this really is quite extraordinary. It's a pattern welded blade, and we're going to come to that. We're going to talk about that because pattern welding is fascinating in its own right. But we've got a stripy core in the middle here. What's going on with that?
Meteoric iron, bloomery iron that I've smelted myself from ore I've dug myself.
So part of this has actually come from space, from the dawn of time work. But this is meteorite and, well, ore, rocks that you've dug yourself.
Yep.
Did you catch the meteorite, or did you?
No, I didn't.
Okay, just checking. Well, that's special.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think it brings a lovely imagined magic into the piece. If we're talking about swords and their roles with people, certainly one of the roles of swords in the Viking Age was to have something you could show off about. And, you know, when these great men, these warriors were talking around a mead hall about the things that they'd done and the objects they'd done it with, to pull out a sword that had meteorite in the middle of it is something pretty special.
You obviously work very closely with Petr on the design and the layout and the symbolism of it. If you talk us through it, but starting at the top here, we've got a warrior standing in the doorway of the gates of Valhalla. So basically that is just an endless rock and roll party pretty much, isn't it? And you're not going to get in unless you're holding a sword or a weapon
unless you've died
so you have to be holding that to get into the Valhalla. So we've got the guy there greeting you once you are dead, and then what have we got going on from there?
Well, it's also a permanent reminder that what you're doing if you're a warrior is you're involving yourself in the potential to die.
Oh, it's all about status and honour and what you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
How you are viewed by others.
Reputation and these kind of things. And just having symbols that remind you that you are a warrior and your job is to kill and your job is to die. The symbolism in Viking culture and the really strong symbolism in Christian culture afterwards. From a sort of early 21st century, it's very hard to imagine the real importance of these as things beyond just little luck tokens. They're really life beliefs.
Yes.
I mean,
I think
it defines who you are.
They're not just working tools. They are a spiritual thing in their own right, because the reputation, the honour, the afterlife, the future of the warrior is bound up in the sword. So it's not surprising that they name them. You know, we all name things that are important to us. And so here we've got the Light of the North, which, you know, that it symbolises, I've read the book, you know, I know what it's about, and it symbolises the future hope of the Viking, the Norse nations. You know, and it's inlaid, it's named.
So one of the nice things about making a sword that's a character in a book, and also in this case a sword that's almost an avatar for the book, it's a representation of an awful lot of stuff that's gone into it, is that it gives you a really fertile starting place to try and make your own work.
Yeah.
So I've put a lot of different elements into the sword blade to try and represent, in my mind, elements of flowing ice in the core, meteoric iron to be the light of the north, a burning meteorite across the sky, and then flames going in there. And Petr's done some amazing work, which again is all symbolic. So we've got the doors of Valhalla, a warrior there to meet you at the doors when you die. The sigil of the main character is a dragon, so we have a dragon, and the sword is a dragon's tongue or a dragon's fire, the light of the north coming out of the mouth of a dragon. So we've got one of Odin's ravens on the end of it. I just love seeing the finished object, I'll be honest with you. This is a real treat for me. Working as a person who does a lot of collaborations, I make the blades, which is the first part of making a sword, and then sending them off and having Petr finish them. Occasionally they come back to me and I get to play with them, covet them and walk around.
But usually you don't get to see the finished object.
No, sometimes it goes straight off to its owner because it's just more sensible to do it that way. Yeah. So it's really, really nice to... and I am a little smitten, which is a strange thing to say about one of your own sword blades, but it's lovely. And as far as I remember, there's as part of the storyline, there's a break and a join in it as well, so it has a purposeful fail and fix.
Oh, really?
Which I think is just here, a little overlap of material. So that's...
So you broke the billet and then re-welded it together again? Brave man. But the blade itself, not the inlay, there are 6 different steels, irons in there.
Six different versions of iron and steel, and if you go across the blade, there's probably something like 1,800 layers or something like that going through it.
That's enough.
Yeah. And then the core of this sword, which is lots and lots of striated lines, it's a combination of materials that would be a soft part of the blade to allow Petr to inlay it, and also from a functional point of view, a lot of these swords have hard edges and soft cores, so you don't snap them. Yeah. This sword was a particularly an amazing commission in that sense, because it combines a lot of things, and it's one of the poshest things we've made together. Certainly one of the nicest ones, if not the nicest one. I'll have a chat about the pattern welding, because I'd like to try and explain some of the pattern welding that's gone into this.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, because I don't do pattern welding, and but I've known you long enough to know quite a lot about the process. But how you manipulate plasticine, I think, is a fantastic thing, because you just sit there working patterns out, don't you, by weaving, folding, cutting plasticine.
Some of it in steel and then some of it in plasticine.
And that gives you your groundwork before you commit to the steel.
Yeah, pattern welding as an undertaking is complicated, and it can be heartbreaking because it doesn't always work. So playing around with plasticine, which is a few minutes to try and work out a pattern, can really save you some failure. Yeah. You can have your failures quickly. So we look at one of the simplest patterns. So I've got 2 coloured plasticines here. So I'm going to make up a 9 layer bar.
And this is effectively how you would do it in the forge, but with metal.
Yes, absolutely. I'm taking different steels and iron with different qualities and putting them together, and then forge welding them. And I'm forge welding them just by squashing them. This is plasticine that I did heat up, but it's cooled down now. And it joins in a very similar way to the way that the metal does. We're using pressure and contact to make it into a single piece of plasticine. Once I've got it forged down into a single piece of plasticine, we're going to twist it.
And warmed up. So in the modern context, we think of welding, getting your electric welder out. But of course, they were welding in forges. So
Yeah, so it's a solid state fusion. It's hammer welding, forge welding, fire welding. Lots of different words for the same thing. And it's a way of joining material pre-modern electric welding. So I've forge welded these together now. Put a bit of heat in there with my hands, and I'm just going to twist the bar. So if I just twist it. So my belief is that with the pattern welding that it originated as a proof of engineering quality. So if a swordsmith makes you a sword and you see twisted bars down the middle of it, from making my own steel, my own bloomery steel, to make bars that will twist is quite an undertaking. You have to do a lot of processing.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. A standard bloom, if you forge it out into a bar and then twist it, it's very likely it won't twist that well. You'll crack it or rip it in half.
Oh, so it's got to be relatively pure.
Yeah, and if you process
clean.
it and forge it again and again,
right,
you can get it to a state where it will. So you're not having to trust that the sword you're looking at has been well made because the core is made of iron that's been twisted 25 times down the blade.
So you know it is.
Yeah. Now the patterns change as you look through the material. If I was to cut into this though, you'll start to see what's going on inside. And what's going on inside is very complicated. The trick with pattern welding, or one of the tricks with pattern welding, is to try and visualize what's happening inside the bar so you know what will happen on the face of the blade. So on the surface we just have a diagonal striping. As I cut through it, we'll start cutting into those overlapped helixes, and it changes quite dramatically.
Yeah, fantastic.
So you start getting crosses. If I take another cut, you can see how it changes as it goes to the middle. So this is a very simple pattern. It's just 9 layers, but you get some quite wonderful and complex.
Yeah. So you've just cut it in a different place and you end up like here with a completely different pattern set.
Yeah. And if you're looking at old swords, obviously part of the job of the swordsmith is to try and reinterpret what you're seeing on the face of the blade to make it and reproduce it yourself. Trying to imagine how far someone's cut into a blade. If it's a blade with a fuller, whether the fuller has been forged or grounding, because that will affect how much material you're taking off. And some of these blades, it's not as simple as having a bar of steel, another bar of steel. Some of them have bars of steel on both sides.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's that
so
kind of complication.
So you can have different patterns on each side of the blade because it's been forge welded down the centre line of the blade.
And this is a traditional, quite simple, low layer sword core. I say simple, I'm saying that now with 25 years of experience behind it. The Light of the North has some swirling fire storm patterns going down it. If I cut through again, that's what we're looking at. This is the pattern. The firestorm is the pattern that's going on in this line of the core here.
So of that whole billet, you probably used 20%?
Yeah, the bit that is good is the outside thirds of the middle third.
Of course it is.
on this particular pattern. And you also have to make enough of it to then put it around a sword blade.
Yeah.
So it's looking for things that fit the storyline with this sword, really. Trying to take pattern and make it into something that has a symbolism. But in that sense, it's exactly the same as would have been done, in my mind, by the smiths who were making original pieces in the Viking Age, or Saxon smiths doing the same kind of thing, is that you are trying to put something that looks amazing, so a warrior can be proud of their sword, so they can slap it out on the table and show off to other warriors who'd be like, oh, what? You know, sort of Odin's blood. I've never seen a sword with flames like that.
And they can all have arguments about how it's done. But so basically in Europe, we're doing very sophisticated metal manipulation for blades. I think 800 years before they were doing it in Japan? More?
Yeah, I think they're very culturally similar, the Vikings and the samurai. These warrior cultures with very ornate, beautifully dressed and armoured and weaponed.
Mythologized weapons.
Yeah, the Vikings and Saxons were doing a much more complicated version than you ever see on any of the Japanese swords. So this idea that the Japanese sword is the most amazing or best sword that's ever made, I think they're one of the prettiest. Yeah, I'll certainly give them that. They've got beautiful lines.
With the whole thing about the hammer-on as well, the quenching lines.
But technically, they're as good as a small element of what went to the Viking and Saxon ones.
I mean, it's one of the things I really like about this whole piece, actually, is that every single element of it has been considered. Every single element of it has some mythology, some story, some life behind it. You know, it's not just connecting one bit to the next bit.
It's a grand old undertaking. It's a nice thing to be involved in.
Yeah.
And it's nice to do something that is, I mean, it's almost like an avatar for the book. It's a representative object that's in a book, but, you know, like a physical symbolism of it.
Yes. Yeah. Translation.
It brings its own magic to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Owen, for showing us the pattern welding process, giving me a tour of the sword, really. And you know, it's nice to see that with you, seeing as yourself and Petr were so integral to the making of it, you know. But of course, you know, the other partner in the making of this was J.C. Duncan and A Song of Steel, because that sword would not have existed without the book. And, you know, it is a great book. It looks at the cultural side of Norse life. And that is something that I find absolutely fascinating, because we know Vikings for chopping people up and raiding and all of that kind of stuff. And yes, there's a bit of that in the book. But really, the book is a lot deeper than that. And that, for me, is what made it very interesting. So anyway, you know, go read it. It's well worth it. But again, Owen, thank you very much for the sword, for showing us that. Well, actually, I'd love to take it, but I can't. So thank you very much, and goodbye.